What's up? Have you ever wondered what's true or what you can actually know, or can we know other people and what they're thinking? Well, today in luck, we're going to talk about truth and perspective. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. I'm Danny here with my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this because I was told you, well, before, if anybody listened to the past episode, that I was writing my journal a lot and all, and I was thinking a lot about, it was Nietzsche who said that, he said that, all truth is like you need a standpoint. So all truth is dependent upon a perspective. There's no objective truth. So he rejected that idea that, there was any truths that we could all know, essentially. And because we always have to interpret the world, through our eyes, if you want to think of it that way, right? So we're always going to add something to it. We're always going to define it a certain way. And I always found that interesting because, I don't know, it's interesting because we are kind of trapped in ourselves, right? In a sense. And so, can we really know anything that's knowable to everyone objectively?
That is a really good question. And uh, before we get into that, we do need
Oh,
everyone's help
yeah.
because if you let us know some topics that you're looking for, like maybe questions, philosophical questions you have, you could ask a doctor and a philosopher. And
Yeah.
yeah, we could do some episodes about things, ideas that you have as well. So if you have any questions, ideas, please post in the comments, email us, whatever it is. We would be more than happy to do
Cool.
questions or
On that
episodes.
note, our email is right in the show notes too. So,
Perfect.
hey, if anybody wants to reach out.
Perfect. So on to what you were saying about how, yeah, we only can see the world through our own eyes. And I heard this a long time ago, how we only experience our own nervous system. So like
Oh, that's a good one. Got it.
because we have all of our senses, but our
Yeah.
senses are extensions of our nervous system. So like the vi sight, I mean, they're all basically cranial nerves. They're all nerves coming from your brain.
Yeah.
And so they're all extensions uh of your nervous system. And so if you have deficiencies in your nervous system, you're going to be experiencing the world differently. And so how could something be true if, you know, different people have different nervous systems?
And then you add to that like emotions, you add feelings, because it's funny because one of the things that like Nietzsche talked about too is always like our physiological state and all these other things that play a role in how we see the world, how we interpret it. And like, you know this, we talk about this all the time. Like, when you're feeling depressed, like everything can seem so different, right? Like all of a sudden, like stuff you used to have so much interest in, you have no interest in, all of a sudden your valuations get real negative about everything. And it's like the world didn't change. The world is exactly the same as it was, prior
Yeah.
to that state. It's you
Completely
that changed.
indifferent to you.
Yeah,
The world is
exactly.
before you were depressed, it was completely indifferent to you, and after
Yeah.
you're depressed, completely indifferent to
Completely
you.
indifferent to you. But I think that's just it, right? It's like it is. The world is indifferent. And, it's not going to just necessarily tell us. And it's funny because I think, it's easy to see, I think, what he was saying when you think about it, especially like with respect to like how we see the world and stuff. But it might even apply beyond that to like even science and stuff like that. Like we can only know, I mean, it's always through a human perspective. We can't know the world any other way. There's no way to get out of that perspective.
Yeah, and it's like if you think about it, like do fish and stuff know that they're in water? I don't know. But it's like, do we know that we're experiencing things in the way that we're experiencing it? Probably not. And also another interesting way of thinking about it. You remember what Russ was talking about a few weeks ago, where he was saying we're all like the main character in the story
Yeah,
of our
yeah,
life, and everybody
yeah.
else is an extra. But everybody else is the main character in their life, and we're an extra in their life. And so it's a crazy like I try and look at that like when I'm sitting around people watching, I'm like, man, I am like an extra and probably like not even a notable extra in that person's life where they're
Yeah.
like the main star and they have all the stuff that they're doing and no matter how much whatever, but it doesn't matter.
You know what's funny? Actually, on that, there was a study they did where like people have a hard time realizing and being consciously aware that other people have inner conscious lives. And it's that
Well,
kind of,
dude,
it's
just look at how
literally
we
that.
tortured people.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's literally that, right? It's that idea of like you're the main star of the story and everybody else is extras. And if you think about it, like I always think about it in terms of like a classroom, right? You go to class and like you see the same people for like a whole semester, right? But you don't really the rest of these people, you're not keyed into their inner life.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's
like
like
they go home, they go do their own stuff, and you have no idea what's going on
but
there.
when you come to this room, it's like they're the bodies that fill that space for this scene. It's
Hmm.
really weird when you think
Yeah.
about it that way.
Yeah. I've heard that like everybody has very different holiday uh customs, like not customs, traditions. And so like a lot of times when families get together, they'll spend the holidays together and they'll be like, whoa, you do it this way, whoa, you do it that way. And it's like we get so used to seeing things the way that we see them that other people don't see them that way. And then it can kind of open up your world.
Well, that's what's funny too, is that right? Our sense of what's normal becomes for us truth, and everything else gets placed in like the either false or weird, kind of area.
Hmm.
Even though really it's no different, it's just this is our way of doing it. And like traditions is a good way to look at it, right? Like the way your family does something or whatever. It might be different from others, probably is. Because
Okay, so I'm gonna say some stuff that's going to ruffle some feathers, but hey, what the heck?
okay.
So it is the holiday season right now, and I was walking around and some dude wanted me to like uh basically like join his religion or something like that. He's one of these people who is very adamant that everybody needs to join their religion. And so I was thinking to myself, and I was just like completely turned off. I kept on walking. But anyways, afterwards I was thinking, well, would he then join my religion? And I'm
Yeah,
like,
right.
probably not. And it's
No.
like, well, that's the most hypocritical stance ever. That like you have to join my religion because my one's the true one, but I'm not going to join yours because that's not the true one because I know the truth. But
Yeah.
yeah.
That's just it though, right? They think you know the truth and
Hmm.
that yours must be right and you're helping them, right? I mean, that's all the Christian missionaries and stuff thought in the past is that,
Hmm.
they thought they were literally saving people
Well, truth is
by
probably one of the biggest causes for war because everybody thinks they're
yeah,
true and the other person is false.
yeah.
And probably if they could see things in other people's perspective, put themselves in the other person's shoes for a
Oh, dude,
little
it'd be so
while, then
different.
yeah.
Well, that's our biggest problem, right? I think that's why it's so easy to have like, like in the US, like we've gotten really polarized in the past, like, I don't know, whatever, 15 years, it's gotten worse, I would say.
Ever
And
since
it's
social
really,
media. It's really just
yeah,
social media. Like I feel like that's
but it's
I feel like social
it's
media
so
is
easy.
only there for politics.
But it's so easy to do that, right? Because once you have that tool, it's so easy to just make everything about two sides when nothing is. Everything's gradations and, everything is a matter of degree. But it's so easy to get
You're
people to
either a
think that,
racist or you're for
yeah,
gun control. It's like,
yeah. And it's
how
like,
is that possible?
it's just very funny how it ends up happening, like where everybody thinks, um, you think, I don't know, it's just weird. Everybody thinks like they have the sole like idea of truth. And that if you don't agree with me 100%, you're wrong. What's funny though? Sorry, I didn't mention. You said the thing about the missionaries. We had, yeah, literally last night, two kids came by our house and, they're missionaries. They're dressed in like their ties and all.
Yeah.
And they knock on the door and I have two dogs and the dogs are barking. I'm like, oh God, because we're on the no solicitor list. They're not
Yeah.
supposed to come. But I answer the door, the dog's bark. I'm holding one dog, and they're like, "Would you like to come to our church?" I'm like, "No." And I didn't want to
Yeah.
be mean because these were not like adults. They were like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know how old they were, but there was no way they were
I
over
love how
20. They
there's
were
all
probably
these lists for like no call lists, no solicitor lists, and no one actually pays attention to them.
no, I know they don't pay attention at all, and it's like I don't know. It's very weird, and then it's very weird to me too. Like to go out, like, are you actually finding anybody? Like that was like, oh, church? Oh, there's a church here? I didn't know
I
that.
was thinking I was thinking that exact thing about politics today. Like all these people who are so adamant about their side on politics. I was like, have they ever actually convinced anyone of anything? Has anyone ever been like, oh, I see the error of my ways. Thank you.
Well, that's the funny part is like originally the whole idea is that if you have free speech, right? The whole idea was that you can exchange ideas and, Mill talks about this in Utilitarianism and on Liberty. Like the idea being that like if everybody has the freedom to think for themselves and the freedom to express themselves, then in the public arena, right, rational discourse will weed out bad ideas, essentially. That was the idea. Now that in theory sounds nice, right? That's a very idealization though, because in practice, people don't actually they're not conversing about these things. They want to force other people to believe what they believe because to them that's right, rather than actually listening and talking about it and actually having a conversation and arriving at what is maybe the best thing, which is probably a compromise between the two,
Hmm.
really.
Probably.
and it's funny. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Truth messes up
also,
a lot though.
yeah, and also I was also thinking about how a lot of this technology and social media creates like a static image that we think it is always true. Like, somebody will record something, they'll record it 300 times and they'll edit it to make like one good recording. And then we think like that's the truth and that's the way it's always been. Whereas like back in the day, people had to do like talk publicly. So like sometimes it would be
Yeah.
good, sometimes it would be bad. Sometimes they would say one thing, sometimes they would say another thing. And yeah.
That is true, actually. I never really thought about that too, is that everything's kind of like you have so many opportunities now to do takes and
And
cuts
and
and
dude, plus with social media, you post something there, it's there pretty much forever. So like, and you know how irrational we are from time to time. Like you're hungry or you're
uh,
tired or you're
so many
lonely or
things.
whatever, angry, and you say this thing. So all of a sudden you say one thing, and then like everybody loses their shit, and then somebody gets canceled because, someone was taking a dump and felt lonely and they posted something, and who knows?
Yeah, it is funny. I remember I was taking this is in graduate school, it's going back a ways, but I was taking a class on, it was like social epistemology or whatever the hell, something like that. But we were doing a thing on a study they had done. So basically the idea was like, the premise was like with the internet, and basically a high school level education, you have access to pretty much any information you need, right? So the
Oh yeah,
idea was
dude,
that,
all the information's out there.
yeah, it's all out there, right? So the idea was that like if you have a high school level education, you know how to use a computer basically, like you can operate the internet. You should be a good citizen because you can go out and seek out a bunch of information about all these views, right? So they run the study, and what they found was that 90, I think 7% of people, what they end up doing is only looking at things that affirm their views. They
Hmm.
never look at the opposite side. They never read anything about anything that contradicts it. And part of that is because, and now I would argue it's probably worse because these algorithms have gotten so sophisticated that they take you down the rabbit hole of more extreme on your
Hmm.
views rather than showing you other stuff. And
Yep.
that's also part of the problem. It's like, dude, you can go online and think that like if you're like Republican or Democrat, you can go online and think that's how everybody thinks because that's all you see all the time.
Dude, I also noticed this because like I am not an avid social media user. And like some people who I meet regularly at the office, they're always talking about all this stuff that they found. And I'm questioning, I'm like, how on earth do you find this stuff? And they're like, oh, it's on my feed. And I'm like, so hang on, you're just like passively taking this stuff and just like doing it because it just shows up magically. And they're like, yeah. And I was
Yeah,
like, man, that's crazy. Like people just get fed stuff that's in their interest. Like one dude likes
yeah,
dogs and coffee, so he's all the time getting everything dog related, everything coffee related, and he just goes to, like whatever shows up, he just goes and does it. And that's great because that's his interest. But like he's never even thought to question that stuff just gets that
yeah.
basically people are just advertising to him.
That's all. Yeah, it's really
It's just
weird, and
magic that it shows up.
it is funny because I used to think that too. I was like, how do you find like when people would share memes and stuff? I'm like, how do you even find these? Because I was never on social
Yeah.
media, so I had no clue. And it's not like you just come across them on the internet. Like you have to go to like,
But I asked him this because like I don't use social media, so like I don't have stuff showing up on my feed. But it's like I try and find this stuff and it's difficult to find.
yeah,
And
because it's
so
making it
yeah.
has some idea of like even if what's crazy too. I was reading that like even if you don't have like say Facebook or something, and I think they still do this, they would
Oh,
make
sure.
ghost accounts
Hmm.
for people. So they take all that metadata they collect and they still make accounts for people so they can use that for their, I
Dude,
guess,
and
advertising
metadata
and
is
stuff.
such a
Remember when
somewhat
the NIS
disingenuous.
and wait, was it the NSA? Right?
Yeah,
It was like,
probably.
oh, we only collect metadata. It's
Well,
like
this is the
everything
thing.
you need.
Metadata is actually more indicative of what people are doing than the actual data that they're doing. Like it's more indicative to know that somebody's calling like I don't know, some type of number numerous times than actually what they're saying there.
Yeah,
So
it doesn't matter.
yeah, so it's a misnomer. That's what it is. Metadata is a misnomer
Yeah.
because it is like the macro data. It's like
Well, it
all
gives
the
you your
important stuff.
habits. Yeah, it gives you your habits. It gives you your tendencies. It gives you,
Hmm.
what leaning you have for in terms of values and stuff. But I
Yep.
think that all goes back to this idea of truth, right? That like if it's if it's only our perspective that we see as true, right?
Hmm.
It's really easy to just discount the rest of the world as being false. and forget that there's like a whole world out there with like tons of different ideas. And it's
Hmm.
like, it's like the missionaries or the guy that like wanted you to join his church. Like there's tons of other religions. Even within the same religion, there's tons of sub, traditions or whatever and groups
Well,
and
okay,
stuff.
so
And like,
again, ruffling feathers. I was thinking about this a whole bunch afterwards because, like Jesus called all the Jews hypocrites because they were like talking about they wanted to be in the high places and everything like that. And he's like, "You're hypocrites." And it's like, but then he demanded that everybody goes and spreads his religion, which would make them all into hypocrites because they want other people to bow to their religion, but not
no, but they're
then
spreading
bow
the
to
good
the other
word though,
religion.
the
Right,
good news,
exactly.
it's
Yeah,
different.
yeah.
No, but
And
that is it.
I
But
mean, this is all theoretical because that's the one true
yeah,
religion, clearly.
yeah, obviously.
Clearly. I
But
mean,
no,
what year is it? We all know who won.
it is funny though, because like, well, it's also like it's so easy to forget that there's other stuff. Like, if you live in the US, right? Like it's easy to even forget that like, most people probably don't even know what Buddhism is,
Nope.
or like most people probably don't even know what Hinduism is, right? Because unless they happen to like practice that religion and probably came from another country and immigrated here, they probably are Christian here, I mean, that's what most people in the US are. So it's like
Hmm.
you just assume that that's the world and those people are weird or wrong. And it's like, well, one, you guys have a lot of overlap between core ideas
Yep.
and values.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very
Or
weird.
also like recognizing that if you have an automobile, you're in the top tier of evolution, period.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
Huh?
Like most people live on foot, some have a bicycle, even fewer have a motorcycle, and then the top tier has a car, and it's like everybody in America has a car, at least one. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
we all won already.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too. I think it's easy to forget, like, and that's the other thing that's interesting with social media is it's really easy to forget that the rest of the world, like the level of
Yeah, I'm
things
not
and
living in
how things are.
Dubai and like going having a
Yeah,
crazy fuck fest in Ibiza every year. Like my life sucks. I'm
my
depressed.
life's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's funny though, because it's the truth. Like I think we don't get to see things because we only see things from our perspective and we don't have a handle on truth. And I think
Hmm.
we'd be better off. And this is one of Nietzsche's points was we'd be better off if we just keep reminding ourselves that like our truths are not capital T truths. They're subjective truths. They're truths for us from our perspective because it makes us more open to other ideas and it makes us less, kind of rigid and stuck in our own way of thinking. Because it also is detrimental to us too, I think, because it keeps us from doing things that might be better for us because we think it's, stupid or weird or we're unwilling to try things because, we have these ideas and beliefs that we formed that we probably didn't even form ourselves,
Yeah,
you know?
definitely did not form ourselves.
No,
Yeah.
crazy.
But it's an interesting practice to try and put yourself in another person's shoes, like see the truths that they're living out. And everybody's trying to do the best they can, even though they frustrate the hell out of me all the time. They're still trying to do the best according
They
to their
are.
values and what they believe.
That's what's funny too, right? It's like nobody's trying to do something. They're not trying to actively do something bad.
Mm-mm.
Even if it is bad from your perspective, it probably isn't from their own. And that's the other funny thing,
Yeah,
you know?
which is the craziest thing. But like even I mean even criminals aren't doing stuff bad from their own perspective. Like they're just
No,
doing the only thing they know how to get ahead.
no, I used to always use yeah, like exactly. I used to use the example of actually 9/11 in class a lot. I was like, because immediately when that happened, obviously, what was the US's response? Was they're evil, right? We need to go after these people, whatever. But I was like, if you think about it from the perspective of the people that did the act, you know, there's no way they thought they were evil.
Mm-mm.
It doesn't
No,
make any sense, right? They
definitely
thought
not.
they were doing something good and attacking some
They were freedom
evil.
fighters, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's like, so once you start to realize that, it's like it's very hard to be be affirmed that you have the right truth
Well,
of the
it's just
matter.
like, I mean, America says that they were right in that scenario and the terrorists were wrong and evil. But if you look back a few hundred years before in the 1700s when America was separating from England, well, guess what? America was the freedom fighters, aka
Yeah,
terrorists, and England was the one who thought that they were right. So
yeah.
it's just,
And
whatever
that's
side
just
of the
interesting,
story.
right? And that's like, well, we've always said that in history, right? Like the victors write history because you write
Hmm.
it to make it, they were the evil people we had to overthrow and this and that. And it's funny when you think about it because I always wonder how much of like the past we don't actually have a good understanding of precisely because of that. Because like the documents, all the stuff we have that survived is from probably like, the winner's side essentially. So,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
we lose a lot.
and so much of history was predated writing,
Yeah.
and a lot of it was
Well,
burnt in the Library of Alexandria, all that
yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
That's the other thing I talk about a lot too, is like, all these things we have like about like our knowledge about like say the cosmos and like our and like the history of the world. So much of it is speculation. So much of it is guessing. Like, you look at like ancient history, like they find a bone and they're like, all right, so this must mean this, this, and this. And it's like you found one example.
Right.
Like, don't get me wrong, it's like that's how it works, right? You slowly piece this puzzle together. But you can't take it as truth. Absolutely, because it's going to change because we have
Mm.
so little information on it. Just like, it's like we didn't know how to deal with what was it, like the gravity issue. So it's like dark matter or what, or
Yeah.
dark energy. And it's like we still haven't figured out what the hell that is or found it. It's essentially playing the role like the ether used to, back in the earlier theories. And
Yep.
it's speculation until we can actually figure it out. And I think it's interesting that like we forget how little we know about stuff and how little we actually understand the world.
Hmm. True. That's a good point. So before we sign off this episode, just a reminder to everybody, if you have ideas for episodes, you have any questions you want us to
Yeah,
answer, feel free, reach out to us, email in the show notes, or you can leave a comment on YouTube,
no wrong answers. And we'll,
except for the
look
wrong
at
ones.
them. Yeah. You'll know if we don't do it.
Yeah, bingo.
There you go. Oh, hope you guys enjoyed the episode. We'll be back later with another episode later this week. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. Check us out on YouTube wherever you get your podcast. I'm Danny. That's Randy. See you later, Randy.
Later, Danny.